"Daddy, I got you a Christmas present," the little girl said, pointing to the Chinese widow. The cold came early that year. Snow covered the streets like a quiet white blanket, soft but heavy, making everything slower and quieter. The small town was decorated for Christmas, with lights hanging from shop windows and paper stars taped to glass doors. People walked quickly, hands in pockets, breath visible in the air. Everyone seemed busy, focused on their own plans, their own families, their own warmth. David walked carefully along the sidewalk, holding his daughter's hand. Emily was only 6 years old, small and thin, bundled in a red coat that was already a little old but still warm enough. Her boots made soft, crunching sounds in the snow. She looked around with wide eyes, taking in the lights, the trees, and the people. Christmas always made her excited, even though their celebrations were simple. David was tired. He worked long hours at a local warehouse, lifting boxes and driving deliveries. Money was never extra, only just enough. Since his wife had passed away 3 years ago, life had become about routine and survival. Wake up early, prepare breakfast, take Emily to school, go to work, come home, cook dinner, help with homework, sleep. Feelings were pushed aside because there was no time for them. That morning, David had promised Emily they would go out together before Christmas dinner. Not to buy expensive gifts, but to enjoy the town, maybe drink hot chocolate from a small stall, maybe buy a tiny toy or book if they found something affordable. Emily had been counting the days. As they walked past the main square, David noticed how people avoided sitting areas. Benches were cold and covered in snow. Only a few people stood still, usually those who had nowhere else to go. He didn't like looking too closely. It made his chest feel tight, and he didn't know what to do with that feeling. Emily slowed her steps. David felt her hand loosen in his. He looked down. "What is it?" he asked gently. She wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were fixed on something ahead. A woman sat near the edge of the square, close to a closed shop. She was wrapped in a thin, dark coat that looked too light for the weather. Her hair was black and tied back loosely, strands falling around her face. Her face was pale, tired, and still. A small bag sat beside her, worn and old. She kept her hands together, trying to warm them with her breath. David recognized the look. He had seen it before, though he tried not to. It was the look of someone who had been ignored for a long time. Emily stopped completely. "Emily," David said softly, pulling her hand again. "Come on, it's cold." She didn't move. "Daddy," she said, her voice quiet, "why is that lady sitting there?" David followed her gaze. He felt uncomfortable. "She's just resting," he replied quickly. "People sit there sometimes." "But she looks cold," Emily said. David didn't answer right away. He didn't want to lie, but he also didn't want to explain things he wasn't ready to face himself. "We can't stop," he said. "We'll be late." Emily looked up at him. Her eyes were serious, not childish. "We're not late," she said. "We're early," David sighed. He checked his watch. She was right. They had time. Still, he hesitated. He didn't know what to say or do if they stopped. Before he could decide, Emily took a small step closer to the woman. Not too close, just enough to look at her more clearly. The woman noticed them. She lifted her head slightly. Her eyes met Emily's, then David's. There was no begging in her eyes, no reaching out, just quiet awareness. She nodded politely and then looked away as if already expecting nothing. David felt something shift inside him. Guilt, maybe, or memory. He remembered a time when he and his wife were young, struggling, but together. He remembered warmth that wasn't just physical. "Emily," he said again, softer this time, "we should go." Emily nodded slowly, but she kept looking back as they walked away. She didn't say anything more. That worried him more than if she had argued. They continued through the square. David bought 2 cups of hot chocolate from a small stand. Emily held hers with both hands but didn't drink right away. "What are you thinking about?" David asked. Emily shrugged. "Nothing." He knew that wasn't true, but he didn't push. They walked past shops and houses. laughter coming from some windows, music from others. Families prepared for the holiday, cooking, wrapping gifts, talking loudly. David felt like an outsider looking in. He did his best, but sometimes it felt like he was only pretending everything was fine. As they walked home, Emily stayed unusually quiet. David tried to talk about school, about Christmas dinner, about the small gift he had hidden for her at home. She smiled politely but didn't respond much. When they passed the square again, David noticed the woman was still there. The snow had grown thicker. Fewer people were around now. Emily stopped again. David felt tired. "Emily," he said, trying to keep his voice calm, "we really should go home." She looked up at him and nodded. "Okay, Daddy." She turned away without arguing. But as they walked, David noticed her small hand tighten around his finger. He felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. At home, the apartment was warm but quiet. It was small, with simple furniture. A tiny Christmas tree stood near the window, decorated with paper ornaments Emily had made at school. David hung his coat and started preparing dinner. Emily sat at the table, drawing with crayons. David watched her from the kitchen. She was drawing carefully, focused, her tongue slightly out in concentration. "What are you drawing?" he asked. "A picture," she said. "Of what?" She hesitated. "A surprise." David smiled a little. "For me?" She nodded. He didn't think much of it. Children always had surprises. As evening came, snow continued to fall outside the window. David cooked a simple meal. They ate together, talked a little, laughed once or twice. But Emily kept looking at the door, then at the window, as if waiting for something. After dinner, David washed the dishes. Emily helped dry them, something she insisted on doing even if she made more mess than help. When they finished, Emily climbed onto the couch and wrapped herself in a blanket. "Daddy," she said suddenly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied, sitting beside her. "Why do some people have no home?" David took a deep breath. He had avoided this conversation, but he knew it would come one day. "Sometimes," he said slowly, choosing simple words, "life becomes very hard for people. They lose someone or a job or help, and they don't have anyone to take care of them." Emily thought about this. "Is it their fault?" "No," David said firmly. "Not always, sometimes not at all." She nodded, satisfied with the answer. Then she leaned against him, resting her head on his arm. David felt her warmth, small but steady. He held her close. That night after Emily went to bed, David stood by the window. The snow had turned the street quiet and empty. The town lights reflected softly on the white ground. His mind went back to the woman in the square. He didn't know why he kept thinking about her. He told himself it was nothing, just a moment that passed. Still, the image stayed. In her room, Emily lay awake longer than usual. She held her drawing under her pillow. In her mind, she saw the woman's tired eyes and thin coat. She didn't feel fear. She felt something else. Something she couldn't name, but it felt important. Outside, the snow continued to fall, slowly covering the town, hiding footsteps, making everything look the same. But beneath the quiet surface, small changes were already beginning, even if no one knew it yet. The next morning, Christmas Day arrived quietly. Snow still covered the ground, untouched in some places, soft and clean. The town felt slower than usual, as if everyone agreed to move gently on this one special day. David woke early, as he always did, even though it was a holiday. Habit was stronger than rest. He got out of bed and stood by the window for a moment. The street was empty. No cars, no voices, only snow and silence. For a brief second, he felt calm. Then the familiar weight returned. Responsibility, routine, life. He went to the kitchen and started preparing breakfast. Nothing special, eggs, bread, a little jam. They had planned to eat at home and later visit a nearby church event where free meals were offered. Emily liked going there because of the music and friendly people. Emily woke up soon after. She ran into the kitchen in her pajamas, hair messy, eyes bright. "Merry Christmas, Daddy," she said happily. "Merry Christmas," David replied, smiling despite himself. They ate together. Emily talked about her dreams, about school friends, about how she hoped it would snow again next year. David listened, nodded, asked small questions. Everything felt normal, almost peaceful. After breakfast, Emily disappeared into her room. David cleaned up, then sat on the couch for a moment, rubbing his hands together. He felt tired even though the day had just started. "Daddy," Emily called out. "Close your eyes." David raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because," she said, her voice serious, "it's a Christmas rule." He smiled. "All right." He closed his eyes. He heard her moving around, footsteps, a door opening and closing, then her voice again. "Okay, open them." Emily stood in front of him, holding her drawing from the night before. It showed 3 stick figures holding hands. One was tall, one small, and one wearing a long coat. "What's this?" David asked. "That's you," Emily said, pointing. "That's me, and that's the lady." David's smile faded slightly. "What lady?" "The one from yesterday," Emily replied. David looked at the drawing again. "Emily." She held the paper tighter. "Daddy, I got you a Christmas present." He laughed softly, trying to keep things light. "You already are my present." She shook her head. "No, this one is outside." Before he could stop her, Emily ran to the door and began putting on her coat. "Emily, wait," David said, standing up. "What are you doing?" "You said we could go out today," she replied. "Come on." He hesitated. Something in her confidence made him uneasy. Still, he followed her. He helped her put on her scarf and gloves, then grabbed his own coat. They stepped outside. The cold air hit them immediately. Emily didn't slow down. She walked with purpose, pulling David along. "Where are we going?" he asked. "You'll see," she said. As they approached the town square, David's heart sank. He already knew. His steps became slower, heavier. The woman was still there. She sat in the same place as the day before, though the snow around her had been disturbed. Her coat looked even thinner in the morning light. Her face was calm but worn, eyes lowered. She held her bag close to her side. Emily stopped and pointed. "There," she said clearly, "that's my present for you." David felt his chest tighten. "Emily, you can't say things like that," he whispered urgently. "She's a person." "I know," Emily said simply. "That's why she's a good present." The woman looked up, confused. She understood only a few words. She noticed Emily pointing and David's uncomfortable expression. She stood up quickly, bowing her head slightly. "I'm sorry," she said in broken English. I not trouble." David raised his hands. "No, no," he said, flustered. "She's just a child. She didn't mean—" Emily stepped forward. "I mean it," she said. David looked down at her. "Emily, please." She turned to the woman. "Merry Christmas," she said slowly, smiling. The woman blinked, surprised. "Merry Christmas," she replied quietly. People walked past them, some slowing to look, others pretending not to notice. David felt exposed, like everyone could see his confusion. "Emily," he said, lowering his voice, "we should go home." "But Daddy," she said, "she's cold." David didn't answer. He looked at the woman again. Her hands were red from the cold, her shoes were worn. She looked embarrassed, uncomfortable with the attention. "I'm sorry," David said to her. "She doesn't understand." The woman shook her head gently. "It okay," she said. "She kind." Emily looked up at David. Her eyes were serious again. "Can we help her?" David closed his eyes for a second. He wanted to say no, not because he didn't care, but because he was afraid. Afraid of responsibility, of opening a door he might not be able to close. "I can give you some money," he said to the woman, reaching into his pocket. She stepped back slightly. "No," she said softly. "Thank you, I don't want." David paused. That surprised him. Emily tugged at his coat. "Daddy, can she come inside, just to warm up?" "No," David said quickly, then stopped himself. His voice sounded too harsh. The woman smiled sadly. "It okay," she said again. "I fine." But she was shivering. David looked around. The town felt empty. The air was sharp. Christmas songs played faintly from a distant speaker. Just for a little while, Emily whispered. David looked at his daughter. He saw something different in her, something brave and sure, not childish or foolish, just honest. "All right," he said slowly. Just to eat and warm up." The woman's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes," David said, "just for a short time." She bowed her head again. "Thank you, my name Mei Lin." "I'm David," he replied. "This is Emily." Emily smiled brightly. "I know." They walked back to the apartment together. The silence between them was awkward but not uncomfortable. Mei Lin walked carefully, as if afraid of stepping wrong. Inside the apartment, warmth filled the room immediately. Mei Lin hesitated at the door, looking around. "Please," David said, "come in." She removed her shoes neatly and placed them by the door. Emily handed her a blanket without being asked. "Thank you," Mei Lin said, her voice shaking slightly, this time not from cold. David prepared tea and reheated leftovers. They sat at the small table. Mei Lin ate slowly, carefully, as if worried about taking too much. "You can eat," David said gently. "It's okay." She nodded, eyes filling briefly before she looked down. Emily watched her closely, smiling. After a while, Mei Lin spoke. "My husband, he died," she said slowly. "Long time sick. We come here for work after everything gone." David listened quietly. He didn't interrupt. "I try," she continued. "But no family, no job, I don't know language good." Emily reached across the table and touched her hand. "You're safe now," she said. Mei Lin looked at her, surprised. Then she smiled softly. David felt something shift again. He didn't know what this moment meant. He only knew that Christmas had already changed. Outside, snow began to fall again, gently, as if the world itself was watching quietly, waiting to see what would happen next. The days after Christmas moved slowly, but they felt different from before. Something had changed in David's small apartment, even though nothing looked new. The furniture was the same, the walls still plain, the heater humming softly in the corner. Yet the air felt warmer, fuller, as if another heartbeat had joined the space. Mei Lin stayed only one night at first. That was what David told himself. Just one night to rest, just one night to be kind. In the morning, she woke early, before David and Emily. She carefully folded the blanket Emily had given her and placed it neatly on the couch. She cleaned the small kitchen without making noise, washed the cups, and wiped the table. When David walked in, he stopped in surprise. "You don't have to do that," he said. Mei Lin turned quickly, looking worried. "I'm sorry," she said. "I want help." David shook his head gently. "It's okay, you're a guest." She nodded, though she didn't look fully convinced. Emily woke up soon after. When she saw Mei Lin still there, her face lit up. "You didn't leave," she said happily. Mei Lin smiled. "No, I hear." Emily ran forward and hugged her around the waist. Mei Lin froze for a moment, then slowly returned the hug, her eyes filling with quiet emotion. David watched from the doorway. He felt something twist in his chest. It reminded him of mornings long ago, when his wife used to hum softly while making breakfast, when Emily was still a baby and life felt uncertain but shared. They ate breakfast together. It was simple food, but the table felt less empty. Emily talked constantly, telling Mei Lin about school, about her favorite book, about how she wanted to be a teacher one day. Mei Lin listened carefully, even when she didn't understand every word. She nodded, smiled, and asked short questions. After breakfast, David cleared his throat. "Mei Lin," he said slowly, "I don't know what your plans are." She lowered her eyes. "I don't have," she said honestly. David rubbed his hands together. "You can stay for a few days," he said, "until you find something better." Her eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes," he replied, "but just until we figure things out." She bowed her head again. "Thank you, I work, I help." Over the next few days, a quiet routine formed. David went to work during the day, Emily to school. Mei Lin stayed home. She cleaned, cooked simple meals, and tried to learn English words by reading labels and watching television. She wrote new words on small pieces of paper and carried them in her pocket. When Emily came home from school, Mei Lin was always there. She helped her with homework using gestures and drawings. They laughed often, even when they couldn't fully understand each other. Emily began teaching her English, one word at a time. "This is chair," Emily said, tapping the seat. "Chair," Maylin repeated carefully. "And this is family," Emily said, pointing to the three of them in a photo David kept on the shelf. Maylin paused at that word. "Family," she said softly. David noticed how carefully Maylin moved around the apartment, as if afraid to break something invisible. She never asked for anything. She ate less than she should have. She thanked him for everything, even the smallest kindness. One evening, David came home late. Work had been hard, his body aching. When he opened the door, the smell of warm food filled the room. The table was set. Emily sat waiting, smiling. "Maylin cooked," she announced proudly. David looked at Maylin, surprised. "You didn't have to." "I want," she said simply. They ate together. The food was different from what David was used to, but it was good, comforting. He realized he hadn't eaten a home-cooked meal like this in a long time. After dinner, Emily fell asleep on the couch, her head resting against Maylin's arm. Maylin stayed still, afraid to move. "You can put her to bed," David whispered. Maylin nodded and carefully carried Emily to her room. David watched, feeling something heavy and gentle at the same time. Later that night, David and Maylin sat at the table. The apartment was quiet. "You don't have to stay if you don't want," David said. "I don't want you to feel trapped." Maylin shook her head. "I feel safe," she said. "First time, long time." David nodded. He understood that feeling more than he wanted to admit. Days turned into a week turned into two. Winter continued outside, cold and gray, but inside the apartment warmth grew. Emily laughed more. David smiled without forcing himself. Still, doubt lived quietly in David's mind. He worried about money, about rules, about what people would think. He worried about getting attached. He had already lost too much once. One evening, Emily asked a question that stopped him. "Daddy," she said, "is Maylin going to leave?" David didn't answer right away. Maylin looked down, pretending not to understand. "I don't know," David said finally. "We'll see." Emily frowned. "I don't want her to go." David placed a hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes things don't stay forever." Emily looked up at him. "But sometimes they should." David had no answer for that. That night after Emily was asleep, David stood by the window again. Snow fell quietly. He thought about the woman in the square, cold and alone. He thought about how close he had been to walking away. Behind him, Maylin stood silently. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. "For what?" David asked. "For making trouble," she said. "I don't want to hurt you or Emily." David turned to her. "You're not trouble," he said, surprised by how firm his voice sounded. She looked at him, searching his face. "I don't want replace," she said softly. "I know you have wife." David felt his breath catch. He hadn't spoken about that. "I'm not trying to replace anyone," she continued. "I just want belong somewhere." David swallowed. "I know," he said quietly. They stood there, two people carrying different losses, standing in the same small room. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the town again and again. Inside, something fragile and real was growing, slowly, carefully, like a light that didn't know yet how bright it could become. Winter slowly began to loosen its grip, but the cold did not leave completely. The snow outside became softer, dirtier, melting during the day and freezing again at night. The town looked tired, like it was waiting for spring but unsure if it would really come. Inside David's apartment, life continued in a quiet, careful way. By now, Maylin had been staying with them for several weeks. At first, David kept counting the days in his head. He told himself this was temporary, just until she found work, just until she had somewhere else to go. But as time passed, he stopped counting without even noticing. Mornings became shared moments. Maylin woke early, but not too early anymore. She learned David's routine and matched it gently, never pushing, never demanding. She made breakfast while David helped Emily get ready for school. Sometimes they spoke with words, sometimes with looks and small gestures. It worked. Emily changed the most. She laughed freely now, not just in short bursts. She talked about school with excitement. She drew pictures that showed 3 people instead of 2. David noticed these things quietly and tried not to think too deeply about them. One afternoon, David came home earlier than usual. Work had slowed, and he was sent home for the day. When he opened the door, he heard music playing softly. It wasn't English music. It was slow and gentle. He walked into the living room and stopped. Maylin was teaching Emily a simple song from her childhood. Emily followed the sounds carefully, laughing when she got the words wrong. Maylin smiled in a way David had never seen before, free, open, and warm. They didn't notice him at first. For a moment, David felt like he was watching a scene that didn't belong to him. A quiet fear rose in his chest. He didn't understand it fully, but it felt like standing too close to something fragile. Emily saw him and waved. "Daddy, listen." Maylin turned, surprised, then quickly lowered the music. "I'm sorry," she said. "Too loud." "No," David replied quickly. "It's fine." He sat down and listened as Emily sang again, slowly and carefully. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling. When Emily finished, she bowed dramatically. Everyone laughed. That night, David lay awake longer than usual. His thoughts would not slow down. He thought about how natural everything felt now. Too natural, and that scared him. He remembered the hospital room, the quiet beeping. His wife's weak smile. The promise he made to stay strong, to protect Emily, to never let pain take over again. Letting someone in felt like breaking that promise. The next day, David's sister, Laura, came to visit. She lived in another town and didn't come often. Emily had told her on the phone about Auntie Maylin, and Laura had grown curious. When Laura arrived, Maylin greeted her politely and stepped back, as if trying to make herself small. Laura noticed immediately. "So," Laura said later when Maylin was in the kitchen, "how long has she been staying?" David avoided her eyes. "A while." Laura crossed her arms. "You didn't think to tell me." "I didn't know what there was to tell," David replied. Laura sighed. "David, I know you're kind. But you have to be careful, you have a child." "I know," he said a little sharply. Laura softened her tone. "I'm not judging, I just worry. You've been through a lot." David nodded but said nothing. That evening, Maylin noticed the change in his mood. She always noticed. "You angry?" she asked quietly. "No," David replied. "Just tired." She nodded, but her eyes showed doubt. Later, after Emily went to bed, Maylin spoke again. "If I need go," she said carefully, "I can go." David looked up, surprised. "Why would you say that?" "I don't want make problem with your family," she said. David ran a hand through his hair. "You're not a problem." She studied his face. "But you afraid," she said softly. He didn't deny it. "I afraid too," she continued. "Every day. But I think maybe fear means something important." Her words stayed with him long after she went asleep. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Emily came home from school quiet and withdrawn. She went straight to her room without saying much. "Emily?" David asked gently. "I'm tired," she said. That night she barely touched her dinner. When David tucked her into bed, she finally spoke. "A girl at school said Maylin isn't my real family." David felt anger rise in him. "What did you say?" "I didn't know what to say," Emily replied, tears in her eyes. "Is she right?" David sat on the bed, feeling the weight of the question. "Family isn't just about where you come from," he said carefully. "It's about who stays." Emily nodded slowly. "Then she is family," she said firmly. David swallowed hard. "Yes," he said. The next morning, Emily hugged Maylin tightly before leaving for school. Maylin looked surprised, then emotional. That afternoon, David made a decision he had been avoiding. When he came home, he sat down with Maylin at the table. His hands were tense. "I need to talk to you," he said. Maylin nodded, nervous. "I can't promise the future," he said slowly. "I don't know what comes next. But I don't want you to feel like you're just waiting to be asked to leave." She listened closely. If you want, he continued, we can figure things out together, as a family, not because of Christmas, not because of pity, but because it feels right. Mei Lin's eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth, then lowered her head. Thank you, she whispered. I will try my best, always. David nodded. His chest felt tight but lighter at the same time. That night, as snow fell softly again, David stood by the window one last time. This time, he didn't feel alone. He didn't know what spring would bring. He only knew that opening his door had changed everything, and that maybe, just maybe, that was not something to fear. Spring arrived quietly, almost shyly, as if it was not sure it was welcome yet. The snow disappeared little by little, leaving behind wet streets and small green signs of life pushing through the ground. The town felt lighter. People walked slower, smiled more, opened their windows. Inside David's apartment, change had already taken root. Mei Lin no longer moved like a guest. She still showed respect and care, but there was ease in her steps now. She hummed while cooking. She laughed without covering her mouth. She sat at the table without waiting to be invited. These were small things, but they mattered. Emily noticed everything. One morning, Emily ran into the kitchen holding a paper from school. Daddy, Mei Lin, look. David leaned over. What is it? I got picked for the school spring program, Emily said proudly. Parents can come. Mei Lin clapped softly. Very good, she said, smiling wide. Emily looked between them. Both of you can come, right? David hesitated for just a moment. Mei Lin noticed and quickly said, Daddy, come. I sit back. Emily's face fell. No, she said firmly. You both come. David looked at Mei Lin. She looked down, unsure. We'll both go, David said finally. Mei Lin looked up, surprised. Then she nodded, her eyes shining. Life moved forward in simple ways. Mei Lin found part-time work at a small local cafe. The owner was patient and kind, helping her practice English during slow hours. She came home tired but proud, handing David her first small paycheck with shaking hands. You keep it, David said gently. She shook her head. Family share, she replied, that word again, family. David stopped correcting it. The spring program day arrived. Emily stood on the small stage with other children, singing loudly and a little off-key. David clapped harder than anyone. Mei Lin wiped tears from her eyes, trying not to cry too openly. After the program, Emily ran to them. Did I do good? You did amazing, David said. Mei Lin hugged her tightly. Very amazing. A teacher smiled at them. You must be very proud parents, she said casually. David felt his breath catch. Mei Lin froze, then David nodded. We are. The teacher walked away, unaware of the moment she had just created. Mei Lin looked at David, searching his face. He didn't look away. That night after Emily fell asleep, David and Mei Lin sat together in the living room. The window was open, letting in cool air and distant sounds of the town. I didn't plan this, David said quietly. Mei Lin nodded. Me neither. I was afraid, he continued. I thought if I let myself care again, I would lose everything. Mei Lin listened carefully. I lose everything already, she said softly, but caring again give me life. David looked at her, really looked at her. Not as someone who needed help, not as someone passing through, but as someone who stood beside him. I don't know what the future looks like, he said, but I know what I don't want anymore. I don't want empty rooms. I don't want silence. Mei Lin's hands trembled slightly. I don't want to be alone, she said. They sat quietly close but not touching. No rush, no pressure, just understanding. Weeks passed. Summer approached. Emily finished school and spent afternoons drawing, reading, and helping Mei Lin in the kitchen. Sometimes David joined them. Sometimes he just watched, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time, peace. One evening, Emily asked a question while they were eating dinner. Daddy, she said, do you remember my Christmas present? David smiled. Yes. That was the best present, she said seriously. Mei Lin looked down, embarrassed. I'm not present, she said. Emily shook her head. You are, she insisted, but not like a toy, like love. David felt his eyes burn. Later that night, after Emily was asleep, David stood in the doorway of her room. He watched her breathe softly, safe and warm. He thought about the promise he made years ago to protect her. Maybe this was how he kept that promise. Not by shutting the world out, but by choosing kindness when it mattered most. Summer brought longer days and warmer nights. Maylin's English improved quickly. David laughed more easily. Emily grew taller, stronger, happier. One evening, as they walked through the town square, the same place where everything had begun, Emily skipped ahead of them. Maylin slowed her steps. "This place," she said quietly. "I think my life changed here." David nodded. "Mine too." They stood there for a moment, watching people pass by, families, friends, strangers. "Thank you," Maylin said suddenly. "For what?" David asked. "For not walking away," she replied. David looked at her and smiled. "Thank you for staying." Emily ran back to them and grabbed both their hands. "Come on," she said. "Let's go home." They walked together, three shadows moving as one. Christmas came again that year. This time the apartment was brighter. There was more laughter, more food, more warmth. Emily placed 3 stockings by the window. David noticed but said nothing. That night, after Emily fell asleep, David placed a small gift on the table. Maylin opened it slowly. Inside was a simple necklace, nothing expensive. Just thoughtful, her hands shook. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's not a thank you," David said. "It's just something real." She nodded, unable to speak. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and quiet, just like the year before. But this time, no one was cold.